comes out of the experience when you're in a dream and you realize the nature of the dream and you have the realization, oh my God, all the characters in the dream are actually aspects of me. There's no separation. The energetic expression of that realization is compassion. And that means even the bankers and the worst Watikos are actually not separate from myself. And then you can actually have compassion, and that's the real protection against Wetiko.
The shadow, the evil one, or Mara, as you just made an example of here, in a way then is the incentive, if you will, for us to actually evolve, to try harder, to reach a new level where we haven't been before. Otherwise, frankly, in a sense, we might just sit around on our ass all day and get nowhere, right? Because there's no reason for us to do that. Everything is good and dandy, right? So, yeah.
Jung calls Satan the godfather of humanity. And what he's pointing at is that when you have an energy, an evil energy, whether you call it Satan, Mara, all these, it's thousands of names, but it actually, so on one level, yeah, they seem to embody this like evil, and not even personal evil, but archetypal evil, absolute evil. But because to understand Wetiko, you really have to shed light on the darkness. You have to have that courage to really come to terms with that darkness, and it's actually within yourself, and you discover, oh wow, it's actually the catalyst. It's inspiring me to evolve. It's actually in a way forcing me to expand my consciousness in a way that I wouldn't have without its appearance on the scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why this is important. And again, we're back to that point you raised earlier, Paul, that we have to have, as you said, courage to shine a light on the darkness and also understand that both components are part of the creation here. We cannot exclude one part, then we're missing half of the picture, because both of these two entities are those who are creating, in my view, in a way, the conditions for life. This is how we begin to operate. This is how, actually, if you look at most things in nature and what we know about the universe around us, you have this tug of war kind of thing scenario going on, and this is what kind of, if you believe in evolution or microevolution, what have you, that's what we see witnessing there, at least, that there's a reason for why these different species are at each other now and then, and this forces them to evolve, as we talked about, and to go into new places, basically. And that's why you can't exclude one part of it and think you're going to progress forward. You're just going to fall back, I think, if you do that.
Yeah, no, to exclude any part of the totality is to actually like avoid being, having a relationship with parts of ourselves. And the thing about Wetiko is that it feeds on that fragmentation, on that disassociation, to the extent that we're not like really having an embracing attitude towards who we are and towards who we are is actually a reflection and reflected through the macrocosm of the world. To the extent that we polarize or split from a part of ourselves or project the shadow or in any way have any fragmentation, that's in a way the open doorway for Wetiko to insinuate itself, into our minds. And now keep in mind the thing which makes Wetiko in a way really, really, hard to discover is that it flavors our perception. So it'll actually, as we're actually contemplating it or trying to find it, it's like the lens through which we're looking through. And if we don't see that, then we're just going to deceive ourselves. Because one thing that Wetiko really teaches you or teaches us is the incredible capacity that our species has to deceive ourselves,
Yeah.
And that's kind of why when people, because I work with so many people and they'll say, wow, I feel really bad. I don't trust myself. I realize I can't trust my perception because I see, my God, I can deceive myself at any moment. And I'll typically say something like, well, that's the beginning of wisdom. That's when you're first beginning to realize the real nature of Wetiko and of yourself. And, and one other way of saying that is, any of us can fall into our unconscious and act out at any point, and that's in a way, one other way of describing Wetiko is that when any of us, to the extent that we're in trauma, what happens in trauma is like we have the whole like compulsion to repeat the trauma. So what we don't remember, we enact,
yes.
And we'll play out and we'll act out. And but the thing is, well, so the thing, because Wetiko is actually very related to trauma, and so when we're traumatized, our like attempts to heal the trauma are somehow the very thing which is creating the very seeming problem that we're trying to heal in this like infinitely self-perpetuating feedback loop. And so because of that, we're actually like acting out our unconscious in a way that's actually feeding the very source of, which is the root of the unconscious pathology. But the thing is, encoded in that, we're trying to complete something. In that repetition compulsion, something is trying to be like decoded or like to liberate something. But if we don't recognize the deeper process that we're playing out, we're just going to endlessly. It's the very thing which informs addictions, you know. And so what I'm saying is that the thing with the Wetiko, it's completely related to trauma, to addictions, to like unconsciously acting out. And who among us doesn't do this? We all do this.
Mm.
But when you begin to discover that the doing of that is somehow the medium through which we can discover what's actually underlying that. And even if I can just enlarge the scope of a contemplation for a second, right now in the greater body politic, we're actually in a way we're actually enacting a suicide ritual. We're killing ourselves as a species. We're actually destroying the biosphere, and we're destroying each other and ourselves, right? But when you actually connect with a deeper dreaming point of view, you discover, oh wow, how come we're doing that? Well, clearly we're a species gone mad. Clearly we're collectively in a collective psychosis. But us doing that is the very way we're actually discovering how not to do that, which we clearly haven't learned, or we wouldn't be doing it.
That's right.
See, and then it becomes a question of, do we actually have the recognition of what's being revealed through our unconscious acting out, in which case we wake up, and the whole thing was inspired by Wetiko. So then, is Wetiko evil, or is it like an incredible gift from like the most highest divine? But if we don't recognize what's being revealed, we destroy ourselves.
And I think that if we had that answer, Paul, if we could put it in that category, it would stop. It wouldn't have the same effect upon us, because then we could either categorize it as evil or good, what have you. We could be comfortable, lay back, and that was it. But that's not how it works. That's not how it operates. It's a constantly elusive force, and we're not meant to be able to nail it down, pin it down, if you will, because if we could, it would lose its potency, I think.
Yeah, and no, definitely. And I keep on having the image as we're talking of like the crucifix, because from the dreaming point of view, when you see Christ and the whole Christ event and the crucifixion symbolically, I mean, it's really like teaching us something. And for me, it's particularly having to do with the tension of the opposites. Like, think about the cross, and here's Christ, he's consciously holding the tension of the opposites. He's not just identifying prematurely with one of the opposites and projecting out the other, in which case you develop like a symptom or a disease, but he's holding that tension, and it's excruciating. It's a veritable crucifixion experience. It's an agony. It's a passion play. And yet out of that comes the resurrected body, which is you could say symbolically is grace, or the transcendent function is the term that Jung uses, the reconciling symbol, something that we couldn't have thought of by our own egoic selves. And the point is that the imitation of Christ, we all are Christ on the cross, and to the extent we're able to, in a way, create that alchemical vessel, the hermetically sealed vessel, where our the projections don't leak out, and we're actually just holding that incredible, because in the hermetic vessel of alchemy, there has to be incredible pressure in that vessel for the prima materia, which is like the darkness and the raw material out of which the gold is made. And so in a way, we're all kind of, you see, and I talk about this in my book, that it's like God is incarnating, but not like it did 2,000 years ago through one person, i.e. Christ, but it's incarnating through all of humanity. We're all getting drafted into this divine cosmic drama of incarnation, and it's incarnating through earthly human beings, where Christ, he was completely pure and white and and light, where like the dark part of totality was split off when you look at it as a dreaming process in the figure of Satan. Right? There were
Right.
the opposites,
Yep.
totally polarized. There's Satan, there's Christ. Christ was totally light. Well, now God is incarnating through all of humanity, through you and me and all of us, and we're these earthly beings who have a shadow. And that, you see, but the thing is, when there's light that's coming into a dream, the shadow becomes more and more visible. So what I'm actually pointing at now is the deeper sort of cosmic, sort of mythological aspect of how to contextualize the Wetiko epidemic. That it's actually that we are getting enlisted into a divine drama of incarnation, where the dark god, this mythic term, is actually more and more showing itself, so as to be actually assimilated into our wholeness, into who we are.
That's right. That's a very good point too. The brighter you make the lights, or the more you turn up the light, if you will, the more you actually have the ability to see the shadow. And I think that's a really good point. I think that's what's happening in our world right now as well, Paul. That's why we see so much shit. Sorry for the word. Out there right now, because this is what's happening. This is an ongoing process, which means as well then that's actually a positive turn at the end, because it's not until you actually can see and recognize something that you have the opportunity to do something about it, or to change it if you don't like it, that is. So
yeah. And if I could just say one thing about that,
go ahead.
What you just said was so interesting. I keep on going back to, from the dreaming point of view, but which actually has to do with just the reality level, with the true nature state. When I'm unconscious of something, right? Say I'm just unconsciously, I have an identification with something, so I can't see it because I'm identical with it. How do I become conscious of it? Well, I project it out. I first dream it up into objectified form. I mean, just think about a dream. You're unconscious of something, so you actually dream it up into the dream, and it'll so it always appears outside of ourselves at first. Right. And then, like I was saying before with the shadow projection, if we don't have the recognition that it's our own energy, we just react to it. But when we actually, it's simply just have the recognition, oh, I'm looking in a mirror. And etymologically, the word mirror actually means shadow holder. Okay. So the whole idea is that our unconscious always approaches us from outside of ourselves. And so in my book, I talk about, the unconscious is coming. The unconscious is manifesting via the outside world. One other way of saying that is that our inner process is actually manifesting as the outer body politic. And to recognize that, that's to have an expansion of consciousness. And when one has that and is able to stabilize that, because it's not hard to have that expansion of consciousness for a moment, in the same way that just like in a dream, you can have lucidity for a moment, but then it's pretty easy to just fall back asleep and get absorbed back into the forms of the dream. The point is to stabilize that lucidity, and then to have everything that manifests in the dream be a stimulator to even more increase the lucidity, to the point when you really stabilize that, and particularly when you hang out with other people who are doing the same practice, you create this incredible, like this stable field of lucid awareness that then non-locally just in a way extends itself throughout the entire universe.
Very good. Very interesting as well. Paul, we're going to continue carrying on with you in the next segment. I think we have lots more to talk about and a lot more to cover, of course, as well. Both things that are in your new book, Wetiko, and some of the other your previous work as well, and where you're kind of heading next, I guess. But why don't we talk a little bit about your website first, though, and give people some idea here about where they can go to pick up a copy of the book, and what they can. Well, give us your website first, Paul. We'll begin there.
Sure. Okay. It's www.awakeninthedream.com. And on the website, there's a ton of articles. They're all free, because I just want people to read this stuff. It's really, I feel, my own personal bias is that it's really important information. And then right on the website is the book Wetiko, and you can just order it. I have lots of copies in my home. I'll just send them out to you, and it's really easy to order. And that's it. Just www.awakeninthedream.com.
Very good. You have some great articles up there as well, including some of the first one. Remember, we linked those up. That was years ago now, but War on Consciousness and some of these, they're great stuff to read through. And very important, I feel, as well. And as I said, Paul, we have much more to talk about. So in the meantime here, then, we'll relay people further to awakeninthedream.com and read more about Wetiko right there on the website. Stay with us, Paul. We'll be right back with more after this break.